So, first of all, tell us who you are.
I'm Kate Masters.
And how do you come to be in Glastonbury this fine day?
I've come down to Glastonbury for the Megalithomania conference 2012, which I come down for every year. I'm going to be curating the art exhibition here and giving a talk.
And your special area, as I understand it, is the Hebrides and the Orkneys?
That's what I'm covering this year, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm going to be talking about a lot of the sites in Shetland that we already know quite a lot about. And I'm going to be talking about the new excavations in Orkney because there's some phenomenal discoveries happening there that's going to turn the archaeology of Britain on its head, really.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
we have some new stuff.
Anything you want to give us a sneaky preview of?
Well, you may well have seen the BBC documentaries about it. It's the Ness of Brodgar excavations near the Stones of Steness. And it's basically a huge ritual centre, and there's a lot of new stuff, unique things that we haven't got in the rest of Europe, basically. So, such as slate roofs, 10-metre thick walls, all sorts of stuff that they've dug up, and they've actually only excavated at this point 5% of the piece of land that has at least 100 structures on it that geophys has discovered that haven't even been excavated yet. And within that 5%, they're already realising that this is a ritual centre of immense importance.
Wow.
So,
And has anybody looked at dating yet?
they have looked at dating. The radiocarbon dating takes it back to at least 3,400 BC. So if you accept radiocarbon dating, then it's pre-Stonehenge and the pyramids.
Mm. Which, of course, is a big question in its own right. But
yes, absolutely.
Let's leave that one alone for now. Okay, so in the greater context of things, are we looking at astronomical alignments?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. They already know that 2 of the buildings on the site, the doorways, have astronomical alignments, solstice and equinox. And they've only actually excavated about 5 buildings of many. So, yeah.
Excellent. One of the main questions about Megalithomania that drives a lot of the people that come here, myself included, Hugh has very succinctly summed up in the line, "What were the ancients up to?" With that in mind, let's first of all talk about who were the ancients.
The ancients, well, I suppose when we're talking in the context of Megalithomania, the ancients were the people in history who we know very little about from all over the world. So as far as Orkney and Shetland are concerned, they are people from the north, really. They're people from a mix of Scottish people and Norwegian. There's a lot of Scandinavian influence in Norway.
And when you look at the sites such as the newly discovered ones, but also in the context further south, obviously, places like Avebury, Stonehenge, some of the European sites, do you think that we're seeing the mark of a unified parent culture? Or is it more to do with just parallel development, do you think?
I personally believe that, I'm not sure if it's either of those things, but I do believe that they had much more contact with each other than we think. I do believe that they were travelling, they were trading, they were taking their boats all the way around the world. Yeah, absolutely. They were certainly very much in contact with each other.
And you touched a little bit on the dating of sort of 3000 BC plus. Mm-hmm. There are various other people. I've spoken at length with Michael Tellinger, who's been looking at alternative methods of dating stone, and of course Robert Temple has been using this newly developed sonoluminescence concept to try to date stone. And some of these are coming up with some seriously old dates for a lot of these sites that significantly would alter our paradigm. Do you think these hold water? Do you think there's credence to be given to these?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, recently I was at a cave site in the south of France, and there's the entrance to the cave that you go into, the first cavern that you go into, has a huge kind of totemic stalagmite in the centre, which is, it's larger than a large tree. It's too big to get your arms around. And it has these natural kind of mother goddess figures in it. And when they dim the lights in the cave, you can see this tiny little hole up in the corner that a light comes through at certain times of the year, and it would have illuminated this column. And this was in Paleolithic times. So these ideas have been with us since the beginning of time, I think. And they've just been developed as it's gone on. I mean, the column was actually painted with red oxide, so it would have been illuminated. It was obviously a very, very sacred place, and these are cave dwellers, you know. So.
Wow. I'd like to look at that further, much further. So, also then, when you do see sites, and you know, we've touched a little bit on astronomy as distinct from astrology, although certainly in ancient cultures, the Egyptians, for instance, astronomy and astrology were not separate sciences. They were not separately studied. They were considered to be part and parcel of the same thing. But that aside, what other factors do you think might have been important for the construction of these ancient sites?
Well, I mean, there's a chap called Ewan Mackay, who I talk about a bit in my talk, who wrote a book called The Megalith Builders in the late 70s, early 80s. And he talks about a priesthood of astronomers, and certainly I would be in agreement with him in that I think that that there would have actually been an elite class almost who were specialists in these subjects. They would have actually been, you know, kept by the other people in a way, looked after by the other people who were doing the actual farming and stuff, and that they were actually spending their entire time studying the skies and studying what was going on. You know, I mean, actually, there's evidence in Orkney to suggest that these people lived on site. That Skara and the Barnhouse settlement, which is next to the Stones of Steness, were the original buildings. They were the original structures on site before the actual monuments were constructed. And these people were living there, and obviously figuring out, you know, engineering what was going to go on at the sites.
One of the things that we have a speaker this weekend, Michael Cremo, who some people will know of from his seminal work, Forbidden Archaeology, which has catalogued anomalous archaeological artefacts which tend to suggest that modern humans, and potentially even civilized, as in civilization, is significantly older than we're given to understand. What's your view on that?
I absolutely think that that the archaeologists, the traditional archaeologists, need to open their minds to these things, because, you know, it may be an anomalous object, but it's still there. You can't just kind of tuck it under the rug and forget about it. I mean, there's all sorts of things like that from all over the world. Why we have to spend 100 years thinking about it and then accept it, I really don't know.
I mean, there does seem to be an intrinsic problem with the way academia is structured, in that it doesn't react well to new discoveries.
Of course not.
What do you think we can do to change that?
Well, I think it's like everything else in life. I think it all comes down to money, because it all comes down to people trying to market their own agenda. So if you've written a book that's specifically about one idea, then that's the idea you want to push, and you're not willing to listen to anybody else's ideas. So I think if we were to actually focus on furthering our studies rather than focusing on making money from things, then we might actually get somewhere with it, you know.
No, good shout. I mean, we fondly imagine, myself included, when we were kids at school, we were taught that the Neanderthal and the Neolithic peoples were very primitive. They had stone tools, they wore skins and howled at the moon and such like. Given your investigations, your studies, and your instinct of it, how far off the mark is that impression?
Very far off the mark, because and it depends what you define as primitive, really. Because if we were, you know, what are we aiming for in life? If you want to be happier, if you want to live a happier life, then surely simplicity is actually a better way of going about it. And as far as I'm concerned, they were magical shaman who knew their place in the cosmos and knew their place on the land and knew their place amongst the animals, and we've drifted far away from that. So how we can think that we're now more civilized and more educated, and, you know, how we can think we're better than that now is beyond me. I'm not saying that we need to go back to something. I'm just saying that we don't give them credit for that. They were just the same as us, you know.
Okay, Masters, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.